Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Well, first of all, could you just state your name for the camera?
My name is Paul T. Nelson,
And you're with?
Waldemar Park in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so could you first discuss your personal background and how you became involved in the industry?
The people that owned the park were my parents' best friends, and they came down to visit them. And to give you a little background, my mother's family had the Pierce Arrow Stanley Steamer dealership in Erie and a jewelry store. And Mrs. Muller's parents were the largest developer of land for real estate in the area. They lived across the street from each other, and my grandparents traveled an awful lot, so she lived more with the Mullers than she lived, or not, they'd be the Andrews, than she did with her own parents. Depression came along and it equalized everybody. So most people lost all their money, including those people. So when the Mullers got married, my mother baked their wedding cake because nobody had money. And so they came down to visit my parents. I lived 50 miles away. And Mr. Muller and I just took an instant liking to each other. And he asked me to come up when I was 11 years old to spend the first weekend after school. I stayed all summer.
So what did you think was so great about the place? I mean, if you stayed all summer, it was...
I just fell in love with the amusement park, and I was a dishwasher all summer. And I was big for my age. So I asked Mr. Muller when he was taking me home if he could give me a better job with more responsibility than a dishwasher. And he said, yes, I will, don't worry. And he said, if you keep coming back and working for me, I'll see you get the park. And that was on a handshake when I was 11 years old.
Wow.
I came back, he gave me a key ring, a whistle, and 2 keys. And boy, I was really proud. And I said, boy, what's my job? And he said, where's my office? I said, over the ladies' room. Every hour on the hour, you blow that whistle, young man, and you clean the ladies' room and the men's room, all of the ones in the park, and then wipe off tables. And then you'll get to know the park. I did all summer. I smiled, I never complained. He's taking me home. He said, what did you learn, young man? I said, never to ask for a promotion.
What do you think Mr. Muller saw in you that you were someone that he would entrust the park to?
I always wanted to do more. Hours didn't mean anything, and I really enjoyed what I was doing.
So, as you grew up, how did your responsibilities change from cleaning bathrooms to...
Every year he put me in a different position. Now you have to remember that he had his own brother working here and nephew, his daughter, and her husband was the general manager. And I ended up with the business.
What were some of the other responsibilities you had?
Well, I eventually ended up in charge of all the food stands, and I was making candy apples, learning how to do caramel corn, and do all that type of stuff. And then when we had catering, he taught me how to do catering. All the time that I was walking around, though, I knew I ran the rides, and I did a little mechanical work and so forth. He just had me doing everything.
And maybe you could describe what Waldemar Park was like back in the 40s and 50s.
Well, back in the 40s and 50s, on a good weekend or on a real busy day, I can gross as much as we did all year. So that's the change of the park. There was no water park. There was very little soliciting of picnics, no gift houses. We have just changed completely. There were, I think, 8 rides here at that time.
That's interesting. You said that you didn't go out and solicit picnics. Did you have, like, GE come in on a weekend, or?
We had a few picnics. I'll tell you, we had 2 picnic shelters. Today we have over 20 picnic shelters.
Okay. Was there a point where you said, "This is my life's work," or was it that weekend showed up here when you were 11 years old?
When I became 11 years old and fell in love, I said, this is where I'm going.
Never any doubt.
Never any doubt.
Now, you eventually worked your way up to taking full ownership of Waldemar. What year was that?
I hate to say it, but I don't remember.
Like, was it like 1978 was?
That would probably be it in the late 70s.
Now,
But one thing that they did, which you can't do today, is I was given property a piece at a time. Instead of giving me a raise or giving me a large salary, I lived with them till I was in my early 30s. And they actually fed me and bought my clothes and gave me a small salary. But they were giving me land, and the land became very valuable. Back then, the federal government didn't make you pay any dividends or any rent. And so the park was given to me by section after section, of which I've turned over a lot of that to my own kids.
now, you had even started modernizing the park before that, correct?
Correct.
Was there a point where you started making some of those bigger decisions?
I started making bigger decisions when I was 23. When Mr. Mueller, when I came back from the service, he gave me a bunch of keys. There were hundreds of them. And I looked at all those keys and I said, boy, what are they all for? He said, you're the wrong person if you can't figure it out. I never asked that question again.
Did you spend the next several hours figuring out what they were all for?
Next couple of weeks.
So when you started getting the responsibility for more bigger decisions at the park, what did you see as some of the things that the facility needed at that point?
Well, I knew that we had to do better in picnics, that we had to diversify, we had to have gift shops, we had to have better rides, and I would plan and plan. Just like right now, I'm 82, I'm doing a 10-year plan with a 5-year plan, and every one of my plans over the years I've done in less time than it took.
Because a lot. I would assume at that point too that the park needed a lot of modernization because probably hadn't changed much since.
Right.
The early
When I
years.
inherited the park, I hated to do it, but I sold the merry-go-round, and I sold the merry-go-round at the largest and best prices that were sold at that time, and that's money I put into the water park. In fact, I thought I had a little bit of money, and I thought I was maybe a little wealthy. I didn't realize that I had to pay the tax on the money that we received, and I was broke again for a couple of years.
Now, when you took over the park in the late 70s, it was really not a good time for parks like Waldameer. You know, the older family-owned traditional parks in the industrial cities. What did you think? What did you think was different about how your approach to it was, and that how it was going to survive and thrive?
Well, what I did is I did not put in new rides and new stuff. I improved the grounds. Our wiring was all above ground. I put it underground. Believe it or not, we didn't have public sewers, and I put in public sewers. We didn't have a big enough water meters to come in, and we did that. We got all of our utilities fixed first, then I went after new rides and so forth. I haven't ever bought a secondhand ride. I'd maybe buy a ride and wouldn't do another ride for 3 or 4 years, but then I'd improve. I'd put a gift house in or do another picnic shelter. And I treated the customers well, and I've retained my help very well. And those two things I think are key.
You know, I think that's interesting. You mentioned that you paid attention to the infrastructure first before you really started growing your attraction space, because I don't know if a lot of facilities really approach it from that perspective. That they put in stuff and then they have to catch up with their infrastructure.
Well, I knew that I had to grow, and to grow I had to do it the right way, and so we grew slow, but at first, and we have picked up steam in the last few years.
Now, you were really one of the first parks to put in a water park along, to complement the amusement park. That was a pretty new concept at that time.
Right, it was new, and we were operating at, I was at 50, when I became 50 years old, the park operated 7 days a week. I gave myself a day off because I was tired of working 7 days a week. And then on that one day off, my wife and I would fly to California. We would fly to Florida and come back the same day, looking at water parks, and all the slides were gunite. And I said, boy, if they get to be fiberglass, I'm going to go for it. And I talked to a company that was very close to Erie, to make fiberglass slides. And a guy named Dick Andret was a big guy who made slides. He went bankrupt while he was doing the park here, but that's when I went in, was when they started doing fiberglass.
And what did you think that the impact of going into a water park would be?
It did just what I thought it would be. It would be like the frosting on the cake. The amusement park rides are what makes them my money, but the frosting of the cake really improved the whole menu.
So you put in the water park and focused on that for a few years, and then I think you then announced a 10-year plan that kind of focused on redoing the amusement park.
Right. And now that we have the sixth best coaster rated wooden coaster in the world, and then our big rides have been very spectacular rides. We have a Mauer spinning coaster and things like that. And then I knew it was time to go back in the water park. So we are doing a $25 million expansion in our water park at the present time. This year we're putting in $10 million alone.
Now, I think one of the things that's really been unique is Waldameer is very much a family operation. It's owned and operated by you and your family. You see a lot of parks that have had problems succeeding from the next generation. A lot of family conflicts within that. And what do you think are some of the things that you did in terms of structuring the business that allowed it to thrive as a family operation?
Well, first, we're not just a family park, we're a community park. The community almost believes they own the park, and that's the best thing that can happen. The second best thing that can happen is your family wants to be in the park. I have 7 grandchildren. I knew that we couldn't get everybody in here, we're not that big. So I chose Steve and Nancy's kids, and then I chose one of them. The other 2 were really not that interested in it. And I believe that you have to have somebody who's interested in the park. Then I set up an irrevocable trust, and I got a large insurance policy, which is tax-free to pay the taxes. And so I've been planning for years and years about passing on the park. It's something that didn't happen. It happened many, many years ago.
So it almost sounds like similar to what the Mullers did with you, is that it was a gradual transition.
Exactly. I was taught that they chose somebody that happened to me, not even their family. And I happened to be lucky enough to get a family member that I chose.
And it sounds like one of the things that really succeeded was kind of keeping that narrow so that you didn't have family shareholders who didn't have a vested interest in the business.
That's correct. If a grandchild didn't ask me to work, I wouldn't ask them to work.
Right. And then they had to work their way up, and kind of like what Mr. Muller did with you.
That's right.
So do you think that's one of the keys if you had to give advice to a family-owned business about succession and planning, that would be one of the keys, it sounds like, is to keep it narrowly focused?
Right. I could tell you one of the best parks in the country where that fell all apart only because they had non-working members have equal share, and then those people want equal, and it could all happen and it could spin it all apart.
So keep it focused and have a plan, it sounds like, is the key. So being involved in the industry for, I guess, going on 70 years now, how have you seen it change and evolve over that time?
Well, there are fewer and fewer family parks. I've seen that involved. One of the things that scares me is absentee ownership. The absentee ownership does not have the same feeling for the community, and the community doesn't have the same feeling for them. And I'm afraid that where you're getting a 2 or 3 price difference, like if you have more money, you go to the head of the line. If you don't have as much money, you wait in line. I think things like that are really, really going to hurt our industry as a whole. I think it's going to come back and bite them. Now, I think that the season pass is a good thing. We've walked into it very slowly, and half of our season pass people come during the week. and they come in for 2 or 3 hours. Our average is twice as much as the national average. We're almost 8 times per person using their season pass in an average. And they're good family people, and sometimes our families couldn't afford to do it otherwise.
I think one of the things that a change that you've latched onto is the whole cashless revolution. You've been kind of an innovator in that piece of the business.
That has been very, very important to us. First, it handles, we had silent partners, let's be truthful. And that's eliminated a lot of silent partners. For example, our games do more gross and we buy less plush. What does that mean? The second thing is the customer likes it. With our cashless system, if you come up and say, hey, I can't find Billy, we can take your card, put it in our computer, and say, Billy was just in the merry-go-round a minute ago, and up the parents go. Or if the child loses their Wally card, we know the number. If the parents, parents has to do is keep the receipt. We put it in the computer. We say, hey, they have $7 on it. We kill that card. We give them another card. Now, little Joey comes up with that card and says, hey, my card doesn't work. I've got money on it. And we say, Joey, where did you buy it? When did you buy it? What was your last 2 purchases? And we say, that was a found card, and we voided it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk about this system, it's not just a way to manage your cash flow. You use it for a lot of other things in terms of security and tracking your customer.
Our biggest thing is going to do is next season. We are going from 6 ticket booths to 16. We found out that 69% of our customers now have a prepaid ticket before they come to the park. They're sold by motels, they're sold by AAAs, by grocery stores, they're sold by plants, they're sold by websites. And so all they're barcoded. So what we're doing is kids can't make change. We'll still keep the older women to be cashiers because they know how to think. The kids, they know how to run a computer. So they do the barcode. If it's somebody who has a season pass, when they barcode it, their picture comes up and they come in. And so it's going to be very fast. And then because we have this core system, we know every point of income, every 15 minutes of where it takes, so we can take the kids from the areas that are used the least in the beginning. They can let the people in. Today it takes on weekends 45 minutes to an hour maybe to get in. It will take walk-in. You just come right in. It's going to be one of the best things we've ever done.
That's great. Waldamere's, I guess, as the industry has changed, is kind of a unique place now because you don't see a lot of traditional family-owned and operated amusement parks in mid-sized cities anymore.
Our biggest thing is some of the bigger parks have got absentee ownerships, which is the best thing that ever happened to Waldemare. We have free parking, free admission, and you can decide what you want to spend. When this recession hit, the last 3 or 4 years have been the best years of our life. People realize we're a bargain and they can come in. And what these big parks forget is, you know who has money? Grandparents. When they bring those kids out, they spend like mad because they're going to turn them back to the parents. But if they have to spend $40 or $50 to get in and bring their kids in, they don't do it. But they'll come in and spend $40, $30 on the kids without thinking. But they won't spend it on themselves because they don't get their money's worth.
Now, do you think that's been